What is going on, everyone? This is Zach here with Clutch Crew Sports, back with another episode. And here on today's podcast, we are going to be talking all about the NBA playoffs. So we kind of missed the first round with all the NFL news, but we are back here to cover the second round of the playoffs. We're going to fill you in with where some of the teams are at and some of the big storylines going on. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my review the other night of Game 4 between the Suns and the Mavericks. That was a lot of fun to record, and hopefully I'll be doing some more of those in the future when I'm not having to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. Now let me introduce you to the rest of the crew.
What's going on, guys? It's Eric, the ranting co-host here. And just got to say, I got a new mic, I got a new computer, and I got a new slide here, which I'm trying to get. My computer's being weird. There we go. So got everything updated. So like Zach said, got some playoff talk here. So I hope you guys enjoy the content.
And what's going on, guys? It's Connor, the co-host with the most. I was happy to, we're getting some new content on the YouTube channel. I saw I got a nice crisp 105 views on that video. I know this episode's about the NBA, but I prefer the NHL playoffs. So, but still follow the NBA playoffs too. So I'm excited to get in and talk about this.
Yeah, hold on a second, Eric. Go back to that last slide. From a distance, I mean, if you don't look super closely, but just on my phone, anyways, it's a small screen. Does that picture of Kenny Pickett look kind of like Eric to anybody?
I mean,
I'm not really
not
seeing
particularly.
It
Okay, I'll screenshot it. I'll screenshot it.
I wasn't sure which of my pictures you were going to point out there. Which of my pictures is he going after? Is he going after the Airbnb? Is he going after the Hurricanes Metro Division champs one? Like, what's he going here?
Yeah,
I don't know if you got to really look at mine. I'm going to go back here, but as you can see, I don't have a favorite hockey team yet, so I have a Go Local Hockey Team Go sign on mine. So,
well, here we can at least narrow it down to the viewers that you're between the Avalanche and the Stars.
Yeah, I think so.
Your two favorites.
Yeah, because I had family in Colorado. They were Avalanche fans like when I was a kid, and then I live in Texas now, so Dallas Stars are the closest team to me, so it'll probably be one of them. But it's still kind of up in the air, so we'll see. I've still got to. I haven't made my
phases
yet.
Of his hockey fanhood.
Yeah, I got to start learning these players and stuff like that, and figure out what I want to do. But I've been watching the hockey playoffs so far. Connor's hockey preview was pretty good. I've been enjoying the hockey playoffs so far as well. So, but I will pass this back over to Zach for hosting duties for this episode.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so we will be talking about the NBA playoffs here, and it's hard for me not to just like focus on that one game that I so closely reviewed, Suns and Mavericks Game 4, but we'll be talking about more than just that. And I think there's the major number one sort of overarching theme of this year's playoffs is just like the physicality. People are calling it kind of like a return to the 90s era of football, not football, basketball. I don't know what's going on here. I've been up since 4 a.m, guys, so it's
Zach's a little tired. He gets a pass.
Yeah. But it's a physical, there's lots of injuries, there's flagrant fouls, ejections, in pure hatred, honestly, in pretty much every series. I think the results of the first round creating these matchups were like the perfect possible matchups for this hatred. Like Bucks and Celtics seems like they've played in the playoffs like every other year. They've had their battles before. And then Mavericks Suns, anytime it's Luka against someone, like Luka's always kind of controversial with his play. And then after watching that game, they really don't like each other. And then Memphis and Golden State, that's had some major incidents in just 3 games already, with star players getting hurt, possibly, breaking the quote unquote player code in that series. And then the Heat and 76ers, you've still got that Jimmy Butler leaving the Sixers for the Heat, sort of thing. And those teams don't like each other either. So it's really been a hotly contested playoffs, and these series are all tight too. There's some of these have only had 3 games played, but the others that have had 4 games played are both 2-2, with the home team winning each game in those series. But I'll pass it over to Eric and just ask Eric, how much of these, do you enjoy these playoffs, and how, it seems like these players and stuff, they genuinely don't like each other. Is it crossing a line to you with some of these injuries that are happening, or are you a fan of this?
I'm somewhat of a fan of it. I've definitely been enjoying the playoffs so far, especially just in the sense that it's really nice that there's not a bunch of sweeps happening, or it's not like, oh, we already know who's going to win. I mean, most of these series are still up in the air, and that makes it interesting and entertaining. On the other hand, I don't like that it's getting so crazy to the extent where, there's all these technical fouls and ejections, and players are, blaming each other. I mean, there was the whole thing where John Morant was upset with Jordan Poole for like grabbing his leg, and then earlier in the series there was the play where Gary Payton got taken out by a really hard foul, and stuff like that. You don't like to see. I don't want these playoffs to be overshadowed by this type of stuff. You want it to be like, oh man, this game came down to a crazy finish, or wow, what a insane way for that game to end. You don't want it to be because, oh, players got ejected and stuff like that, because I feel like, say like if John Morant doesn't get hurt and there's not all this controversy, like this Grizzlies Warriors series, for example, could be a really great series. But it kind of sucks when the main thing getting talked about is the players taking each other out, and is it acceptable the way it happened? Like, was it unintentional, or was it on purpose? And did they break the code and all this stuff? Like, I don't want it to get too much about that. Like, at the same time, I don't mind when teams are physical. Like, I don't like when it looks like an exhibition match out there, and like an all-star game. Yeah. And I don't want it to be like that. But I also, you don't want to see people getting hurt, and you don't want to see like such hard fouls where people are getting injured like that. But so like, I don't mind the aggressiveness. It's just, it's starting to get a little too aggressive for me. But I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I guess Connor can comment if you want on this.
I mean, I'll just go back to what I've said before. I mentioned this in a previous episode. It's like I'm talking too much about hockey in an NBA episode, but like, maybe make it like hockey where they can fight and get penalties for fighting, like make them put their money where their mouth is, and maybe they'll think twice about committing these kinds of fouls, or doing these kinds of things when people out there can bust their face in, or actually do something like that. I don't know, but yeah, I agree. Just, it's something that probably doesn't belong in the game. There's always going to be a healthy amount of bad blood and a healthy amount of physicality that goes into it, but at some point it's just like, okay, everyone needs to grow up and get over themselves, and stop committing these stupid fouls that really don't have any place in the game. So I definitely agree with Eric that I feel like we're talking a little bit too much that when we probably shouldn't be, but it's happening, so it's what's getting all the headline.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I wanted to kind of talk about here is, it seems to me anyways that like the Milwaukee Bucks are, even though they won the championship last year, it's like nobody's really paying attention to them. People came into the series thinking Boston was going to win. I don't know, Eric, what you predicted to win, who would win that series, Boston or Milwaukee, but like, do you think they're being underrated now, especially with when Middleton was hurt?
Yeah, I think people probably started sleeping on the Bucks once Middleton went down. I don't think they were when he was still there, but I think everybody figured, they'll still get by the Bulls, no problem. But, when it came down to the Celtics, who had just swept the Nets, I mean, I think everybody had their money on the Celtics. I mean, and I did too. I even predicted the Celtics to win this series even before, the playoffs started when the Bucks still had Middleton. Um, but I give the Bucks credit, like especially Giannis, just in the sense that in the past he seemed to struggle more when Middleton was out. Like you could always see, how important Middleton was, and he still is important. They still need him back, but you could just tell like Giannis is not the same player without him normally in the past. But in these 3 games against the Celtics so far, like 2 of the games he's been really good, and the game that they lost, he didn't have that great of a performance, especially in the first half. But he started to kind of turn it around in the third quarter in that game, but it just was too late. But he's definitely impressed me with the way he's playing, and I do think people are sleeping on the Bucks right now when they probably shouldn't.
Connor, I'll ask you this. So I don't know if you ended up watching my review at work or not, but the Mavericks Suns series, Mavericks tied it up now 2-2. Chris Paul has had 2 really bad games in a row on the road. Personally, I definitely think the Mavericks can win the series, which I would have said is crazy at the start of the series, but after how they won games 3 and 4, I think it's very realistic. And honestly, I might even pick them right now, knowing what we know that they'll win the series. But do you think they have a shot, or do you think the Suns are going to get into gear and take care of them?
I mean, I definitely think they have a shot. I mean, yeah, I did listen to your review while I was at work. I forgot to mention anything about it, but no, I mean, I definitely think they have. I mean, I know all of us in a way, I think maybe this was because of how bad Luka's injury was, but I know none of us even picked them to beat the Jazz at the beginning in our initial predictions. And then, of course, all of us had Phoenix beating Utah because I don't think any of us thought Utah was going to go very far. But I mean, this is another thing that I don't know if it's true among. I know at least Eric had Phoenix going further, but you and me, I think out of all of us, I was probably the one that was like the least of a believer in the Suns going into this anyway. That I definitely did not think that they were, if I had to pick my like top 3 like teams that I thought was going to win the championship, the Suns were not in it, in my opinion. And I know that was definitely not in most people's opinion, given that they were the best team at the end of the regular season. But I don't know. I just didn't think they'd be able to hold it up. There was going to be something that was going to go wrong. Someone wasn't going to show up. And obviously, like you've mentioned, it's been Chris Paul recently. Obviously, he fouled out in the last game, and that's not good. But it's just like, it seems like Booker and Chris Paul can never both be on at the same time. And unfortunately for them, I don't know if Devin Booker or, I think Chris Paul kind of proved in the finals last year when Booker wasn't playing well that he can't be the one to carry the team. I don't think Booker's good enough to carry the team either. I don't think he's on that same level as like a Giannis or a, like LeBron in his prime or a Steph Curry, that he can carry his team to victory just on his own without help from anyone. So, if the Mavericks keep it up, I can definitely see them winning this series. They were really close in game 1. They kind of got blown out in game 2, but they've been competitive in 3 of the 4 games that have been played so far. And obviously they've won 2 of them. So it's tied up. So I definitely think the Mavericks have a shot at winning it, but I just don't. This may be a little bit overarching too, but even if the Suns can get past the Mavericks, I don't see, with the way that they've been playing so far in the playoffs, I don't see them getting past either Memphis or Golden State.
So Eric, because I disagreed with what Connor said about Booker not being good enough to lead them on his own. Do you agree with Connor on that, or do you think Booker can? Because I definitely think he can. It's one of those things where yeah, you definitely need help around you. But Chris Paul scored 5 points and they only lost by 10 points in that game, So if you
Yeah,
get sweat any more, a little bit more love out of Chris Paul, and it's not like the Suns have 3 or 4 All-Stars. They've got 2, him and Paul, and then a bunch of good guys like DeAndre Ayton, Crowder. Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't. Bridges, but because they were in the finals last year. He had a good playoff run. I think Booker is on that level of Giannis and LeBron in his prime. Do you think so, or do you think like Connor?
I think he can. It's just the problem for me, for what I've seen with him, is it's inconsistent and he's not doing it enough. I mean, because like you talked about in your game 4 review, that he was lights out in that game and that he was easily the Suns' best player in the game. But the problem is he'll have a game like that where, because this I remember this happened in the playoffs a lot last year too, and even in the finals and stuff, where it's like one game he gets like 40 points and has an insanely high shooting percentage and he looks like a beast, and then in the next game he goes like 5 of 16 or something. I with Devin Booker, I want to see it more, and that's my only problem with him. Like, I think he has that potential to be great. I know we don't really like using that word here, but
That's your favorite word, Eric.
yeah, he can be that. I just don't see it. I haven't seen it quite enough from him yet, and I do agree with Connor right now in the sense that I do think Phoenix is still going to win the series, just because I don't think the Suns are going to be able to stay as hot shooting as they are, and they still have to win one game in Phoenix for sure. So I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, but I did pick Phoenix to get actually even to win it all, when we made our playoff, prediction before the playoffs started. But I don't see them. I'm most likely Golden State will beat Memphis, I think, and I just don't see them getting past Golden State the way the Warriors are playing right now. So I do feel like this could be the end for them after this series, but obviously because of my predictions that we made, I hope I'm wrong there, but so I just don't know. With Devin Booker though, I need to see it more consistently out of him for me to be a true believer. Like right now I'm in the stage of it's more like, which Devin Booker are we going to get kind of thing, and that's not quite good enough,
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's like we kind of were thinking about that Giannis just like 10 months ago, until he actually won the finals. That
Yeah.
was his
See,
thing. And it's
Giannis got to that point, and he's still showing it.
That
Like
was
I talked
totally
about
through
in
all
that.
of my coaching and advice. That's my client
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, I saw this article earlier about him where like he was really bad at managing his money, like moving from Greece and everything. And they were like, "Oh yeah, this person was helping him manage his money." I'm like, "That was actually Connor, And
Yeah,
I
I'm
stepped in
just
with Connor consulted me for my financial knowledge.
they just don't like using my name. They
Yeah,
just want to,
they don't want to give a small podcast credit for something like that.
some random guy from North Carolina managing, one of the biggest stars in the NBA.
Yeah, but we all know the real truth.
yeah, it'd be nice if you could somehow get him to force his way out to go to Portland and join Dame out there. I think that'd be good.
Well, you see, I've been working on this deal for him to actually, make his way over to Charlotte and team up with team up with Airbnb, LaMelo, and Miles Bridges. Been working on that a little bit.
Well, y'all shouldn't be thinking so selfishly like that, because the Thunder have like 1 million draft picks we could give the Bucks to get them. So really, we would be the most logical destination.
But the thing with the Thunder though is that do they really want to give those up? They just want to keep acquiring more. They're not in the business of giving them up. They want to just get more and more.
Well, Sam Presti needs to get on the phone with me and we'll have a talk about that. So, oh man, that was fun.
Yeah. Next thing I want to talk about, and this is a positive thing. So it's like we've been talking about some negative stuff potentially, but who? Let's think of the young stars now, because I think that's another theme of the playoffs is all these young, a lot of them guards, but just young stars coming up, and it's a lot of people are just now finding out like who are these names, because everybody knows the Steph Currys, the Chris Pauls, the Giannis type players, but maybe someone younger, a little bit more under the radar that you really think has stood out this playoffs. For me, it's going to be Tyrese Maxey. I know Eric's a big fan of doing DraftKings lineups, and he's always, when I've done DraftKings with you, Eric, he's always super cheap, and I'm shocked at how affordable he is because he's just been lining up in the playoffs. He seems to get better in the bigger moments, and he's a real X factor for the Sixers. I think he's just as important as Harden is, in my opinion. And long term for the team, he's going to be even more important than Harden because who knows, what team he'll go to next. So him pairing, I mean, it was pretty clear to me last year even that he was going to be more important than Ben Simmons was, and then eventually Ben Simmons got traded. But Maxey to me is just a really good playoff performer. He had a good regular season too, but for me, out of the young guards, he's the one that I think is definitely in a few years from now, a lot more people are going to know about him. And if Philly goes on a run this year, he's definitely going to get his credit. Connor, I'll go over to you and let you go second here on this one. Who's a young player in the playoffs that you really like?
For me, it's definitely been Jalen Brunson from Dallas. I mean, just what he's been able to do. And I think one of the best stats that I've seen from him this season, really, especially in the playoffs too, is that you might think to yourself like, oh, okay, he's doing really well because he's playing with Luka and Luka's garnering all this attention. And, kind of like sometimes we talk about that in the NFL with some of these receivers, they're really good when they have a superstar on their team, but then like when they're forced to be the number one receiver, they're not really, they can't handle it. And his stats and his percentages, they really don't change at all when Luka's there and when Luka's not there. Like he still keeps up the same level of consistency. He keeps it up night in and night out. And, he to be, it's something that the Mavericks have sorely needed. We've talked about this before that, Luka's always been sorely in need of some help to get this Dallas team going. In the past we'd mentioned Porzingis, but he was always hurt, so he never really turned into that true second player that the Mavericks needed. But right now it's becoming Jalen Brunson. I mean, he's averaging somewhere around 24, 25 points a game. He's got some really high assist numbers as well, and he had some really good. He's got that mid-range jumper. He's got one of a really high percentage. He's shooting over 50% from throughout the series. So I definitely think Jalen Brunson for me is the best one, and maybe he can finally be that second piece that Luka really needs. That maybe not this year, but just kind of building for the future. That next season, the Mavericks, it's like, okay, we have our guard core in place now. Now if we can just get a better big man, then the Mavericks can be dangerous in the future, possibly next season.
All right, Eric, are you going to go with a third guard here, or are you going to go with a big man?
Yeah, I want to go with another guard. I thought about Jalen Brunson too, just because he used to have this weird, insanely good, driving slash move in 2K that I used to use against you all the time.
Don't remind me of that. That was stupid. I had one of me having Eric Bledsoe, one of the better higher end defensive point guards, and just Brunson would just floop, floop, and I'm like,
just
what
fly by him every time. I loved it, man. I loved it. That's how I first discovered him. Actually, until he started having this breakout performance, so it was pretty cool to see that. But yeah, I'm gonna go with another guard. I mean, I'm gonna go with Jordan Poole. Just watching what he does for the Warriors he has such a big impact for them. They can, whenever they go small ball, they can have him out there with Steph and Clay, and of course, they're generally going to generate all the attention, and he's done a good job when he's gotten the ball. And even when Steph or Clay, if they're both on the bench, when the Warriors and their opponents are having their starters take a breather. Like, he comes in and he really takes over the offense. I mean, he's been such a valuable piece for them, and he'll probably be the eventual replacement whenever Steph or Clay are ready to retire in a few years. Like, they already like have their replacement ready, which is nice that they don't have to try to go sign somebody in free agency or find somebody in the draft. I mean, they've already got the replacement lined up already, which is nice for them. So yeah, Jordan Poole has been a great player and another up and rising star in these playoffs.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought him up because it's going to lead into kind of my next question here, Eric. But I mean, how big of a mistake do you think it was for Durant to leave this Warriors team? Because imagine if he had stayed with the Warriors and you got this team that they currently have plus Durant. I mean, like, that'd be unstoppable for sure. But do you think that's a mistake? Do you think he had to go to Brooklyn to like prove it that he could win without Clay and Steph?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why he did that. I mean, personally, if I was him, I probably would have. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's not like his Nets career is over. He could win a title next year, and
no, for sure. But I mean, it's definitely been fair to say that
good right now.
It's definitely been fair to say that his Nets career has not gone how it was expected to, and all of that. But I still was upset with him for obviously leaving OKC as a Thunder fan. But even then, he's left the Warriors to go to the Nets, supposedly to, prove he can win without a bunch of all-stars, but then also got Kyrie and James Harden. So I still don't.
And then still didn't win.
Yeah, still didn't win. I mean, they had injuries. Kyrie got hurt and Harden wasn't 100%, but still, they immediately gave up on it within the next year, trading Harden and everything. So I don't necessarily think it was
Ben Simmons, Eric. Ben Simmons is going to be the one to complete that trio and
bring
the title.
I meant to say, Zach, earlier when you were talking about Tyrese Maxey, you did have a error that I needed to correct. You said the guy's name was Ben Simmons, and I think you meant to say Bum Simmons. You did have a mistake there, so I just wanted to I wanted to correct you on that one. But
it's late, it's a Monday.
Yeah, so I know you're tired and everything, so I just still wanted to make sure you knew. I give you a pass, but just making a note for mental, for the future. But I don't.
But he had back soreness, Eric. It back soreness.
Yeah, that's legitimate. And yeah, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, as for KD, like getting back to him, I don't think it was a mistake for him to leave the Warriors in terms of trying to improve his legacy. So I don't like how he went about handling getting the new team, like I talked about. But if he in terms of winning, potentially winning more championships, it was definitely a mistake to leave. I mean, if he had stayed there, they wouldn't have been able to get Andrew Wiggins because they wouldn't be able to afford to pay Steph, Clay, Draymond, and himself and Andrew Wiggins. But still to have, I mean, a starting lineup with Steph, Clay, Poole, KD, and Draymond that's pretty scary, that they could still have if he was there. So I'm glad he left in the sense just because these playoffs have been pretty unpredictable, and especially at this point now that we're getting deeper in the playoffs, it's no guarantee like, oh, this team's for sure going to win, or out of all the with all four of the series going on right now, any team could still win. I'd say if John Morant's injury is kind of serious, and I don't think Memphis has a chance, but even still, you never know. That Memphis was pretty successful without him during the regular season, so any of these teams could win. But if there was a lineup that the Warriors have right now plus KD on it, like, we would all know the Warriors are going to win, and these playoffs wouldn't be interesting to watch at all. So
GG other teams.
Yeah, exactly. Be like, everybody else would just be playing for second, So, but it's nice that it's even and competitive, and you don't know who's going to win, because that makes it more exciting to watch. So, I'm glad KD left.
Well, we all had to live through like the 4 straight years of Cavs Warriors,
Cavs Warriors,
Cavs Warriors,
yeah.
Cavs Warriors.
And before that, it was like the Heat versus the Spurs, or most likely the Heat were going to be in the finals. So like this is a nice change of pace.
I kind of wonder if like we'll ever see that again, like a Heat or not a Heat, like a Warriors Cavs 4 in a row. Because even when Jordan was in the finals every year, it's not like they played the same team each time.
No, the only back-to-back they had was like the
Jazz,
but that was the only one. Yeah, it was like a different team every time. All the other times,
it's just crazy. Like I don't think we'll ever see that again.
I hope we don't.
I mean, unfortunately, I think in a way it could be possible just with how all these players like to, make these super teams and everything. Like I will say honestly, if you take like, a little bit younger LeBron and, a little bit younger Russ, and then like you take away, the injuries that the Nets had during that last season, like it was very possible that we could have seen like Lakers Nets. But I think, it was a little bit different in the sense that like that Lakers team that everyone was calling a super team, it was made up of a bunch of old veterans that were past their prime. Like in their prime, yeah, that would have been really good. But, at this point now it's kind of like, okay, that was really a waste of money and a waste of time by the Lakers because it ended up missing the playoffs. And then, of course, like the Nets were looking really dangerous last year. I mean, even with like missing one of the big three, like they almost took out the Bucks, who eventually went on to win the title. So
yeah,
I think
if KD's toe was like an inch farther back in that game 7, the Nets would have won that series, which is
right.
great.
So like, it's definitely one of those like, I think it could still happen. Like, is it likely? No, but I definitely am not writing it off just given how all these players want to form super teams these days. Maybe when we get to like the next generation of players, like once LeBron retires and Kawhi and Kawhi gets a bit older and Durant gets a bit older, like we might move past that. But
my hope is that I think the biggest thing that started to turn the tide for me with this, where I was hoping maybe this would no longer happen, is when Giannis decided to stay with the Bucks. Because I mean, there were a lot of rumors going around that he was going to, possibly team up with like LeBron or something, or
team up with like Jimmy Butler and Miami,
or go to Miami and be with the Heat with Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero and all them. Like, but when he stayed, I'm like, okay, maybe. And then like Jokic stayed with the Nuggets, and maybe if some of these like younger guys, like maybe like say like Ja Morant and Luka, like when they're ready to be extended and get a big payday, like if they stay with their teams and these players start being more loyal to their teams instead of the other way around, then maybe it'll be prevented. But we got it. Yeah. But as long as LeBron, Kawhi, and KD are in the league, then there will still be attempts at forming these teams because all three of them are known to do that.
That's true. Yeah. I just think like, yeah, those three guys are, but they're definitely not in their primes anymore. I think KD's the only one still that could like really be an MVP, but I just don't like, and I know that there were all these, there were a lot of greats when LeBron and Jordan played, but there's no, people thought Zion was going to be like the next LeBron, but
that hasn't happened.
I could have told you that from the beginning.
Yeah, I know, but like, there's a lot of really, really good players, and I just think it's not going to happen because there's too many. It's like every team, even some teams that missed the playoffs and were booted out in the first round, like Trae Young just 2 years ago was like the talk of the league. You got on Connor's team, Ball is an all-star. He's really good, but they didn't even make the playoffs. Dame's going to come back with the Trailblazers and all these other teams. Eventually, some of these.
Look at the Grizzlies this year are probably the best example of that. Like, they were down and out, and then I mean, even like I know they kind of fell off towards the end, but like how well the Cavaliers did this year, like none of us saw that coming. We were like, oh, the Cavaliers, they're like down and out. But then they were, at the end of the day, they missed the playoffs. But had this been like the original playoff format, they would have been in. So, like, it's pretty crazy just how it shifted this year.
Yeah. But ultimately, to me, it boils down that like we don't have a LeBron type talent or a Jordan type talent, but there's lots of very, very good talent. So, and they're spread out too. And like you said, they're not these young teams. These teams are building around young stars, not necessarily making super teams. There are the occasional, like the Lakers attempt, the Nets attempt, but to get that level of repetition where you meet those same teams in the finals every year, I think the parity's at a good level for the NBA right now. But we went pretty much the whole episode without talking about the one seed in the East, the Miami Heat. So I just got to quickly bring them up real quick. We'll have one more question for you guys, but the Heat are going to be my answer to this. And my question is going to be, which of these teams currently left in the playoffs is the most stably formed for the future? Like the next 5 years, they're going to be a consistent round 2 playoff team. Like to me, it's the Heat. I'm a huge fan of their young core. They have so much depth. They're one of the most well-run organizations in the league. They're always drafting these second round, guys that people don't pay attention to that end up becoming major contributors. And to me, their system, the way they draft and smartly spend their money, smart trades, the Heat are the team to me. I think that they might not win the championship. I picked them to win, but for 5 years in the future, I definitely see them being in the second round. I think they're injury proof too. It's, that is a good thing to have in this. You want to be injury proof to have long-term consistent success. So that's going to be my pick. But Eric, what about you? I know that's it's kind of a tough question to answer, but who would be your pick?
Well, the Thunder have like 1 million draft picks, so I'm going to go with them. Just obviously, that wasn't your question, but I just had to throw that in there. I'm still going to go with the Warriors, just because of like what I talked about with Jordan Poole earlier. I know like Steph and Clay and Draymond are getting older and everything, but they've still got some young pieces on that team as well, and they're another team like the Heat that are really good at drafting. I mean, like all the pretty much, the majority of their key pieces are players that they drafted onto that team. So Jordan Poole's emerging, like I talked about earlier, and they've got Kuminga, who he's good. It's just that there's just so many other pieces on that team that he's just more of a, depth guy right now, but he could end up being a, bigger piece for this team going forward over the next few years. And just the way the Warriors have been building their teams over the last decade, like I feel pretty confident that over the next few years, they're going to continue to be really good. And, Steph and Clay and Draymond all still have a good couple more years left in them at least. And then I think by the time they're ready to hang it up or move on or whatever, that they're going to have the replacements for them ready to go. So I'm going to go with the Warriors. But Connor, what about you?
Well, I'm just going to guess. I'm just going to guess Connor's going to pick the Bucks, but that's my guess.
No, actually, that's not what I'm going with.
Well, because Giannis is going to get traded to the Hornets, so
yeah. No, I mean
that's why Connor's not picking them.
No, I mean the thing for the Bucks is that I don't know. I just feel like they have a lot of if they maybe had some younger talent on the team, they're full of a lot of. I mean, I know Grayson Allen's kind of had a little bit of a more of a breakout year, but I mean, other than Giannis, if you look at their team, it's Brooke Lopez and Drew Holiday and Wesley Matthews, and I mean even Middleton's getting a little bit older, so I mean they're just a bit I mean I definitely could see them in the playoffs for the next 5 years for sure, but I'm gonna go actually with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, I like that one.
Because I mean it's just the thing for me with them. I mean, if you just have to look at what's setting you up for success, having young talent that you've brought in or drafted or anything like that. I mean, if you look at the Grizzlies, their entire starting five, or even if you include their sixth man, D'Anthony Melton, like they're all under 24. So it's pretty crazy how young this team is and how far they've gotten, how well they've done this year. And I mean, John Morant, he's just going to keep getting better. Desmond Baines really started to break out. He was another candidate that I was thinking about as like the young stars that have broken out during the playoffs. Desmond Baines been a good one. Jaren Jackson Jr. is getting better. It's just this team, with how young they are and with, the spot that they're at right now, it's like, if they're already doing these good things at this age, I think it's kind of similar to how we were talking about the Hawks a little bit last year. I know the Hawks eventually didn't pan out this year, but I mean, who knows? The Grizzlies kind of look like that again, and I'm hopefully, for my sake, as a prediction sort of thing, that they don't end up how the Hawks turned out this year. There's still time for the Hawks, but they didn't exactly turn out the way I thought they would. But the Grizzlies are looking very, very solid for the future.
Yeah, to me, it's just like I need a little bit more pedigree with them, a little bit more trust. Like the Hawks
I will say the other thing that I was trying to go for was I was trying to not go with the same as the two of y'all.
True.
Because if I had to, honestly, like the Grizzlies would be, if I had to go, like if I wasn't trying to go different, I would agree with Eric with the Warriors would be my number one, but the Grizzlies are my number two.
Okay, gotcha. Well, do you like the Heat? I mean, do you disagree with me on my Heat take?
I mean, I'm not sure I necessarily disagree with you. I just think this year has kind of been like, I think the Heat more so represent to me like what happened with the Hawks last year. Like I think this year is going to be a flash in the pan. Like I definitely think they could still make the playoffs, but I don't know if they're going to make it back to this level that they're at right now. Like I could see them getting in as like a 6 seed, like a 6 seed or a 7 seed, but like first round exit is what I'm thinking for them.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I feel like we rambled long enough about 20 different
I do have one more ramble thing I want to do real quick before you end the episode. I just have to say, if you're watching this on YouTube and this picture in the top left corner, this guy calling for Kyle Anderson to get a technical foul in the background is pretty amazing. I noticed that when we started the episode.
The guy was like,
give him a T. Like he's got the technical foul symbol ready, and he's yelling like.
Dude, there's nothing I love more than going to a basketball game and when there's some sort of questionable sort of event that happens against your team and you're like the other team could get technical, like doing the T sign, like if a coach gets all like when you see the coach run on the court angry, you're the fans. I love doing that at games, and then
it's kind of like at football games when like everyone starts making the motion, like throwing the flag motion, like
challenge it,
challenge it, Bruce.
And then man, this is getting way off topic, but so that's my favorite thing to do. Like as a fan at basketball games, my least favorite thing that I like to see is when players twirl their finger for a challenge.
Oh, it's a challenge.
Oh, yeah, that's annoying, dude.
I could start a rant about that. I won't, but I've been hating that for years. Every
guy gets fouled for trucking a guy into the first row, and then he's like, "Oh no, challenge, finger bag." Oh man, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh no, you're good. But anyone else got anything before we finish this up, or are the ramblings over?
I'm good.
I will say, just speaking of like parity and how like we talked about how close everything is, like at the time of this recording, the Bucks Celtics game is at halftime and it's a 1-point game. So like I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and I mean if there was 0.5 more seconds on the clock, the Celtics could be up 2-1 in this series because that game went down to the wire.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. So definitely looking forward to seeing how the rest of these playoffs pan out.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. That will wrap up this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed listening and watching. And until next time, remember, be clutch.
Bye.
Peace.